They saw the Amorites as barbarians. Their descriptions of them, these are people who don't farm, they don't live in houses, they live in tents. They don't bury their dead on the day that they die. They don't cook their meat.
But after the initial turmoil caused by sudden immigration, the seasons and patterns of agricultural life in the flatlands began to work their calming magic. By 1900 BC, the Amorites had been completely assimilated into Mesopotamian life. They became soldiers, farmers, and businessmen, and rose to the ranks of governor and general. They consolidated their hold on Mesopotamia by establishing dynasties in the cities of Isin, Larsa, Eshnunna, and they founded the city of Babylon.
It turned out to be actually a good thing for Mesopotamia in the end that the Amorites came, because some of the greatest Mesopotamian kings were Amorites.
In 1792 BC, the credit for gathering together the entire land of the two rivers under a single scepter fell to the most illustrious ruler of Babylon's Amorite dynasty, Hammurabi, who came to the throne as its sixth king.
He ruled for 43 years, and starting in his 30th year, he gets it into his head to emulate Sargon, to build himself an empire. He starts campaigning against the neighboring kingdoms. And these are neighboring kingdoms that had previously been allies. These are some of them he had long-standing relationships with. And all of a sudden he's turning up on the borders with his army ready to fight, ready to take them over.
Hammurabi's military campaigns were distinguished by the growing popularity of hostage-taking for the purpose of ransom.
There were merchants who specialized in this, who would go and ransom the Babylonian soldiers from the enemy. They would pay the ransom, and then they were required to be paid back. So they're a win-win situation for the merchant, because they would make a profit of these ransoms that they were paying.
Hammurabi's conquests extended from the Persian Gulf in the south to the Syrian border in the north. Although his territory wasn't as extensive as the lands ruled by Sargon, Hammurabi is widely regarded as the greatest empire builder since Sargon. He established a centralized, efficient government at Babylon, which became a city brimming with energy and culture.
Whereas Sargon seems to have relied upon his power and his almost terror tactics to keep people under control, Hammurabi presents himself almost like a modern politician in that he wants to be loved. He wants the people to like him. He's going to set up laws that will protect them, not laws that will terrify them and force them into submission.
Hammurabi's fame grew from his conquests, but his greatness derives from his achievements in the realms of justice and learning. Towards the end of his reign, he erected monuments in several cities. The largest one to remain intact is a stone slab known today as the Hammurabi Stele. It contains a list of 282 legal pronouncements. They're written in a wedge-shaped script called cuneiform, the earliest known form of writing, which developed in Sumer at the end of the 4th millennium. Some of the judgments are draconian. For example, if a slave says to the master, "You are not my master," the master shall cut off the slave's ear. Another reads, "If a man brings an accusation of murder against another man without providing proof, the accuser shall be put to death." And again, if a woman is not discreet, thus neglecting her house and discrediting her husband, they shall throw this woman in the water. Hammurabi's administration of justice was comprehensive. His code comprises a mingling of ancient taboos and traditional customs with modern practices. His civil and criminal regulations cover many subjects, including commercial, family and property law, prices and wages, and slavery regulations.
Some of them seem very sensible to us. Hammurabi's, the court spends a lot of time on specifying the social position of a married woman, when she's at fault for doing something, when she's not, what her property rights are. Laws that seem very, very advanced to us nowadays and very much not unexpected. On the other hand, what we find in the Hammurabi Code is the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth passages that totally parallel the biblical notion of that.
Hammurabi's justice was not necessarily equitable. Rights varied on an individual's status in society, whether as a land-owning free citizen, or a civil servant, or a slave.
If you, as a citizen, kill a slave, you might get away with just paying a fine. If you kill another citizen, you most likely are going to be killed for that yourself. So certainly in the old Babylonian period, not all animals were equal.
The promulgation of law by Hammurabi was not the first time the people of Mesopotamia had been given a legal system to live by, but his code was the most detailed and thorough. Scribes who practiced the law and wrote the contracts also wrote down the knowledge of mathematics, astrology, and they also wrote poetry. One long narrative poem, the Epic of Gilgamesh, became the first great literary work in the world. Following Hammurabi's consolidation of power, southern Mesopotamia became known as Babylonia, a unified kingdom. It thrived.
So it was really Hammurabi's doing that made Babylon what it was and what it would be under the Neo-Babylonians, Nebuchadnezzar, when it was this great, huge metropolis of the ancient world.
In 1750 BC, illness compelled Hammurabi to abdicate in favor of his son. But the dynasty endured. By 1000 BC, Babylon had established a lasting state in the south. Meanwhile, the city of Ashur dominated a rival state, Assyria, in the north. Soon the region's rulers, like its desert sands, would undergo a profound shift. Babylonia would have to compete for power against North Mesopotamia, which possessed the ancient world's most formidable fighting force, the Assyrian army.
The empires were getting bigger and bigger and more ruthless.
The Assyrians, a Semitic people, had inhabited northern Mesopotamia for at least 4,000 years. By the 9th century BC, their conquests extended beyond Ashur, the capital city and the heartland of Assyria. From 885 to 860 BC, King Ashurnazirpal II concentrated on military campaigns to annex the surrounding territories.
He wants to build up the power of Assyria. It had previously, several hundred years earlier, had been a major power. And Ashurnazirpal seems to have been determined to reinstate it as a major power. And the whole emphasis of the administration is on military matters.
Ashurnazirpal's campaign set the standard for future warrior kings of Assyria, who were ruthless and determined empire builders.
The reliefs that are carved into the walls of the palaces of the Assyrian kings show siege engines ripping apart the walls of enemy cities. We see warships with battering rams on them. We see chariots. We see cavalry. We see infantry digging tunnels underneath the walls of the cities that they're besieging. The empires were getting bigger and bigger and more ruthless.
Ashurnazirpal was notorious for the sadistic cruelty with which he dealt with prisoners of war and also his own subjects who protested against his oppressive taxation.
He would make a point of being as brutal as possible. He describes in gruesome detail flaying people, putting their skins on the wall of the city, making pillars of decapitated heads. Really horrible, gruesome stuff. According to scholars, he probably didn't do it everywhere. He would take one city and do it as an example and terrify everyone else into obeying.
By the time of Ashur-nasirpal's death in 860 BC, his kingdom extended north to the borders of modern eastern Turkey and west to the Mediterranean Sea. In the century following his reign, the desire to control Babylonia and the lush, fertile south dominated Assyria.